Good evening, good evening, good evening. If you are coming in, please like and share this video. Please like and share this live stream. Thank you for joining us for Sisters Healing and Evolving's Healthy Woman. She's Healthy Woman episode for the month of June 25th at 7:30 p.m. We're so excited to be joining you tonight to discuss and have a candid conversation on minority mental health. And of course, I have the lovely Mrs. Phyllis Booz, who is the owner and our health and wellness educator and coach of My Heart's Desire, MHD Consulting, where she is advocating for healthy change. And so I'm excited, Phyllis, to have this conversation tonight. We do have on screen that we'll be sharing a snippet of a speech which Phyllis and I thought would be very interested and very eye-opening for us tonight when we're talking about minority mental health. So as you're coming in, if you would like this video, you will share it so that others can see as we're talking about minority mental health tonight. Welcome, Phyllis, and thank you for joining us, taking time out of your busy schedule to join us this evening so that we can talk about minority mental health. How are you this evening?
I am great. Thank you, Chandra, for having me. And as usual, it is a pleasure. You're not taking time at all. This is time this is a true get to. One of the things I love to do is I love health information and I love educating. So this is something that I just delight to do. And the more I find information, I get on fire because this information is going to, some people may already know this, but this information is just going to be illuminating. So we're going to get started first of all with this video. And with this video, all the information that we share today is for educational purposes only. Education purposes only. This information or anything we say in this chat, in this conversation, is not meant to diagnose. So if you are needing a diagnosis, please see your healthcare provider. And we do not own the rights to this video. So we are going to get started. But please, if you have any comments, it is very important that you put comments in the chat because we want to hear from you, because this is all of us. We are here, not just one person going through this. This is something that we all probably have dealt with. So who you see on the screen? This is B.B. Moore Campbell, and she wrote a book called 72-Hour Hold. And of course, if you have any experience in the mental health arena, you know that when you go into the emergency room, they will place you on a 72-hour hold, right? So some of us are familiar with that, whether it's ourselves or whether it's a family member. And so this excerpt that she's reading from her book, now B.B. Moore Campbell, the minority the Minority Mental Health Month is actually named for B.B. Moore Campbell Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. And so it was established in 2008. She has since passed away from brain cancer, but her work in mental health is astonishing. And we were going to go into some of her books and plays and other things that she has. But Chandrell, do you want to go ahead and share the video?
Yes. And before I do that, I want to say, if at any time during this live, you feel that you are overwhelmed with emotion or feelings of hurting yourself, please use the National Suicide Prevention line. It's available to you 24/7 at 1-800-273-8255 or dial 988 if you need mental health emergency help. And that number will also be on the screen later on. And I will go ahead and start the video. Okay. Okay, let's see. Bear with me. I'm working this technology.
Mm-hmm.
All right, there we go.
All right.
Good evening. Thank you. It's good to be here. I usually talk a little bit and give you some background. I'm going to do just a tiny bit, but I had such a wonderful entree there and you've got such a good synopsis. I thought I would start it with the reading and just pull you into the story, and then we could talk about mental health. I want to thank New Words for bringing me here this evening. It's a pleasure to stand before you. And thank you for introducing me and for setting up the reading. A 72-hour hold is indeed the length of time that a psychiatric facility can hold a mentally ill person against his or her will if that person meets the criteria of a danger to self or a danger to others or gravely disabled. The part of the book I'm going to read is right after the daughter, Trina, has had a 72-hour hold. 3 days. It takes 4 to 6 weeks for proper medication to start to work. You do the math. So this is really a Band-Aid for hemorrhage. And when the mother brings the daughter home, she discovers that all is not well. Looks that way in the beginning, but all is not well. I'm taking my meds again, Trina announced one night, after 2 or 3 days of relative quiet. I just turned off the television in the family room and was about to go to sleep. Trina called to me from her room, which was at the top of the back stairs. Her door was partially opened, and she was lying across her bed. "Did you hear what I said, Mommy?" "Yes, honey." "Come here, Mommy." I went into her room. Trina had picked up all the clothes that she dumped on the floor. The top of her bureau was neatly arranged. Comb and brush here, perfume there. She was wearing jeans and an ironed shirt. When I sat down on the edge of her bed, she threw her arms around me and kissed my cheek. "You're a good mommy," she said, resting her head against my chest. I went to bed, warning myself not to feel better. That would be like Sally Hemings sending out wedding invitations. The next morning, when Trina woke up and came to me with a glass of water and swallowed her pill in front of me, I tried to kickbox the hope that surged through me. Get back. But what's a foot against hope? Trina swallowed medicine and my day became full of smiles and sunshine. Maybe it's over, I told Maddie. A few days, of course, wouldn't banish mania. It would take weeks for the meds even to begin to be effective. Still, Trina's intent was important. Maddie's own daughter was peaceful, compliant, and living at home. Gloria's son was back at his board and care, once again attempting to be sober and medicated. My friends' children were finally getting it. Why not Trina? What followed were days when my shoulders steadily crept downward and my breath became steady and even. I worked a full day here and there instead of my recent split shifts. The headache that had taken residence above my left eyebrow began to recede. At night, I slept. One afternoon, I went to Orlando's apartment. There was barely any conversation between us. We made love quickly and efficiently. For so long, I'd forbidden myself to want Orlando, the smell of him, the weight of him, his voice when it was low and throaty. But that day, he was my drug of choice, my self-medication. "You ain't fooling nobody," Francis whispered when I returned to the shop. "Look at you just smiling all over your little self. Must have been good." "Mind your business," I said. Throughout the good times and the bad times, Clyde never called me, although I knew he spoke with Trina, if not regularly, at least often enough for him to be able to gauge her mood fluctuations. I'd heard her talking with him, jumping from one topic to the next, her mouth going 1,000,000 miles an hour. Listening, I thought to myself, do you get it now? I came home one evening, and Boy Man was standing in my kitchen. Up close, he looked like insufficient funds, a bounced check on weed. "Why are you here?" I asked. Before he could answer, Trina came clickety-clacking down the stairs, high heels, red lips, bright cheeks, a dress the size of a Ritz cracker, odor weed clinging to her. "Here we go, take off." Whoosh. "Trina," I began, placing myself between her and Boy Man. She waved her hand, which was a warning that said, I can become a fist. I don't want you to go out, Trina. You're not well. Bitch, you're not well. She's not well, I said to Boy Man, who stared back with interest. If you leave here, you can't come back, I said to Trina, my voice shrill. The door slammed and then again against the inside wall as I yanked it open way too hard. The car was in the driveway, the motor running. Trina, you come back here. I could hear her laughing. They were both laughing. I raced around them, got to the car before they did, and stood in front of it, my arms stretched out wide. Jesus on the cross, right? Trina had the nails. Glancing back, I saw jazzy Mrs. Winslow watching from her window. Across the street, another neighbor's shade was raised. 2 car doors slammed. I didn't move. Boy Man backed up, went around me. Girl, your mama crazy, he said as he took off. Getting there. My body was shaking as I walked back to my house. Something beneath the quivers broke through the band that held my mind in place when I saw Mrs. Winslow still peeking. What the hell are you looking at? She's not some freak. She slammed her door. I slammed my door. Trina returned the next day, disheveled, glassy-eyed, stoned, and manic. I was sipping coffee in the kitchen when she came in. The hot liquid sat on my tongue unswallowed as I watched her. I'm taking my meds, she screamed, pulling out a bottle of the mood stabilizers from her purse. She poured herself a glass of water, then shook 2 pills into her hand and gulped them down. See? I left for the store knowing she would sleep, but not sure for how long. I canceled with Orlando. By the time I returned home, Trina was walking out the door again. Another night, another rendezvous. The next day at work, I called a list of board and care facilities and visited a few during my lunch hour. They were all horrible, straight out of One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, inhabited by unkempt women with missing front teeth, men who sat still as warthogs, looking for prey. She can't live here. Not my baby. I called Maddie that night. Come to the meeting next week, she said. You're under pressure. No, I was underwater. Melody's mother, with her grandchildren yelling in the background, listened to me. Do you think that maybe Melody could talk to her, try to get her back on track? Well, Celestine began, then excused herself as something crashed behind her. She was gone for a while. When she got back on the phone, she sounded like someone who'd just pulled a double factory shift. The thing of it is, Melody's doing good, yeah, and I don't want her around nobody who ain't. You talk about Melody influenced your daughter. Suppose your child influenced mine. And me with these grandbabies, too. You have a point. Didn't mean to. All that wildness, I'm not going down that road no more. Melody know that, too. If you don't take your meds, better find you another home, yeah. Maybe that's what you need to tell your girl. Right. You living a good life up there in the hills. You probably got the money and insurance to go along with every little crazy thing your child do. Me? I ain't got it like that. I can't be bailing nobody out time after time after time. No. I told Melody, you don't stay on your program, you on your own. And all Mama wants to know is, do you want to be cremated or buried? I'm serious. When somebody black gets acting a fool out in these here streets, the cops gonna shoot them and go on about their business. Just like they killed that man over on Crenshaw. What man? Some man on Crenshaw yesterday near where those guys be selling stuff. He was trying to fight people, acting all crazy. Somebody called the cops and they shot him, yeah. They said the man used to walk up and down Crenshaw Boulevard all day long. I could taste fear in my mouth as I drove toward home. Maybe I began to grieve in my car, shedding tears for Crazy Man, crying hard as if I knew him. Or maybe I was crying because I didn't want to know him. Several scattered bouquets marked the spot where Crazy Man had been killed. There was dried blood on ground so close to where I lived, it might as well have been right at my front door. He was going off, Mr. Bean Pie said. Started screaming and hollering, talking about the CIA was after him, that we was all working for the CIA. Then he started tearing down the street, pulling off his clothes, CD Man said. By the time the cops came, he was near butt naked. This last contribution from one of the incense people who added, but they ain't have no right to shoot the man, even if he was crazy. I got me a cousin act just like him. Don't we all? The telephone began ringing as soon as I got in the house. I thought it would be Orlando. He'd been staying over the last few nights, but the call was collect. Mommy, Trina said. her voice amped up with excitement, with manic pleasure. I'm in jail, and I need for you to come get me right now. What happened, Trina? What jail? Where's your father? I didn't do anything. Get me out of here right now. Where's your father? Why are you in jail? What did you do? They said I stole something from Saks. You get me out of here, she bellowed. Shoplifting. I could barely breathe. Does your father know where you are? No, he went out and I really wasn't here. He left me with the housekeeper. I tried to ignore my rage and concentrate on my leverage. I will not bail you out unless you agree to go to the hospital. I don't need to go to any damn hospital. Then stay in jail, I said, dial tone. Will you accept the charges? Part 2. You're going to the hospital, Trina. If you leave, I'll revoke the bail and you'll be arrested again and you'll stay in jail. Do you understand me? Yes, Mommy. The jail was on Martin Luther King Boulevard. The bail bondsman didn't arrive for more than an hour, even though his office was right down the street. As soon as he came in, shaking the building with his slow, heavy steps, he disappeared downstairs to take care of the bail and didn't come back up for another hour. Sitting in the waiting area, I tried to make my mind go blank, to pretend that waiting for my kid at the police station was as normal as tap water. He returned with bad news. He did not accept personal checks, and he didn't accept credit cards. My bank is closed. I can't get more than $300 out of the ATM machine. I don't want her sitting in jail overnight. Sometimes that's the best thing for him. When he looked at me, there wasn't a trace of kindness in his face. Is there somebody you could call as the father in the picture? Yes. No. Jesus. Just hearing the word father, I could feel anger exploding in every part of me. Orlando wasn't at home. His cell phone went right to message center. I didn't leave a message. Neither Maddie nor Gloria answered. Frances had just bought a house, and I knew she didn't have any money to spare. Bethany answered on the third ring. I'll be right there, she said, after I explained what had happened. She handed me an envelope as soon as she walked in the door. What's she in for? Shoplifting. Poor baby. She was quiet for a moment. We found Angelica, she said. Where was she? On the street. Where's she now? At my house. I've got friends staying with me on rotating shifts. So what's your plan? Bethany asked. I sighed. I'm going to take her to the hospital. She said she'd go. I'll go with you. The bail bondsman disappeared downstairs again, and when he came back up, he told me that Trina would be released after she signed the paperwork. Another hour passed before Trina emerged. From across the room, all I could see were her lips, bright orange and shiny. The closer she got, the more colors I saw. Blue eyelids, rust-colored cheeks, black eyebrows. Trina was giggling at some private joke. We're going to the hospital, I said, taking her arm. This is my friend Bethany. She loaned me your bail money. Bethany took her other arm. She didn't resist. Trina got into the front passenger seat of the car and buckled up her seatbelt. In between the giggling, she sang. Bethany sat right behind her. I watched the traffic and Trina, but I couldn't do both at once. At the second red light, I heard a sound. Click, click, the seatbelt. Bam, the door. Trina running, getting smaller and smaller. The back door opened and Bethany sprinted after her. As I watched, my car stood in traffic, not moving, cars around me blaring their horns. Finally, I parked and waited for Bethany to come back, hoping that she wouldn't be alone.
Okay. So, whew, that was a lot. That was all I can say is there's so many of us that can be touched with that story. And if you want to listen to more and the ending of it, we can absolutely share the link to the video. So first of all, just want to say if there's any comments, and while we're waiting on comments, I'll give you a little backstory. Like I said, BB Moore Campbell National Minority Mental Health Month, Awareness Month, was established in 2008 to improve access to mental health treatment and services and enhance the public awareness of mental health among minorities. And BB Moore is an author. She's a journalist. She's a teacher. She's a strong mother. I'm suspecting maybe that Trina, the one in the story, could be her daughter, which her daughter was Tiffany, or is Tiffany, from the show In the House. That was some years ago. She was a founding member of NAMI of Inglewood, California. She also died of brain cancer some years back. She had books, bestsellers, New York bestsellers, Brothers and Sisters, Singing in the Comeback Choir, What You Owe Me, which was the best book of 2021. She has a novel, Your Blues Ain't Like Mine, which was inspired by the murder of Emmett Till. She have a memoir called Sweet Summer, Growing Up with and Without Dad. Um, she has a nonfiction called Some Successful Women, Angry Men, and one that I'm really interested in is called her first book, her first children's book called Sometimes My Mommy Gets Angry, which was published in 2003, and it won the NAMI Outstanding Literature Award. So as you see, there is so much that this woman has contributed to mental health and mental health awareness. And that's what we're here today. We really want to continue the conversation, not only just with mental health, but mental health with minorities. What does this mean to us? Chandra, do you want to? There's a quote by Miss Campbell. If you want to go ahead and read that.
Yes. And just to highlight, there's so much trauma in that short excerpt of that story. And it's real life. This is something that she was really experiencing, and most of us can relate to it if we have family members or loved ones that suffer with mental health illness. And we're going to talk about, after I read this quote, it's going to set the tone for the remainder of this conversation tonight. B.B. Moore, this is by B.B. Moore Campbell, and she says, while everyone, all colors, everyone is affected by stigma. No one wants to say, I am not in control of my mind. No one wants to say, the person I love is not in control of their mind. But people of color really don't want to say it because we already feel stigmatized by virtue of skin color or eye shape or accent, and we don't want any more reasons for anyone to say you are not good enough. And this is a quote by B.B. Moore Campbell. And when you go and look at the remainder of that video, you will see that she's talking about stigma. And we're talking about minority mental health tonight. And a lot of one of the main reasons, or one of the vital reasons or critical reasons that we're not receiving the mental health care that we need is because of stigma. Who wants to share this story? She shared a personal experience in this book about her daughter. Many of us have family members, could be children, loved ones, brothers, sisters, siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, who suffer with mental health illness or disorder. And we do not share. We have been conditioned and spoken over so long to have these things and not to talk about them, or not to acknowledge them, not to address them. And so stigma has been really causing us to lack when it comes to our mental health and gaining the stability. As I was listening to her, what came to my mind when she was talking about stigma, and as you know, breaking the stigma is she's it's just Dare to She's Hard, and it's our mental health slogan, break the stigma. It just reminded me, what came to my heart and to my mind was, stigma stands for suppressed traumatic issues gaining momentum against stability. We're suppressing these traumatic issues. If you go back and listen to it, just that short portion of that book is plagued with traumatic issues, not only because of what the daughter's dealing with, but she has her own issues because of her trying to handle and to fix what's going on with her daughter. She has her own dramatic issues. You could hear it in her speech when she spoke about her father, Trina's father, not being in the picture. That's a traumatic issue she was suppressing or dealing with. her relationship with Orlando, and not fulfilling it as she would want it to be, because of all of the other issues. Those were issues that she was suppressing. Her daughter, going to jail now, having a shoplifting charge, not taking her medicine, and then on top of that, the trauma of seeking help and not being able to receive it for your family member. That in itself is an additional trauma, because you sometimes you feel like you're at your ends with. Um, just like the other lady was saying, I don't want to be in foolishness. She know. Some of us have said that to family members. Some of us have said that if you don't do this, you don't do that, trying to force them into compliance, with treatment. We've said these things, um, and probably at the time thought that we meant them, but we really didn't. It's just it was out of sheer frustration and just being tired. And then you have no help, because when you do turn to the mental health, system, it's very difficult, to receive the help that you're looking for, because if they are not an active participant in their recovery plan, there's almost no help available. And as she said, 72 hours, that's 3 days. That's not enough time to even get the medicine in their system. That's barely enough time for them to come down from whatever. If they're a drug addict, it's not enough time for them. It's just barely enough time for them to come down off of the high. It's barely enough time for them to be able to really to think clearly about getting help. So, Phyllis, I'm going to let you jump in here, because this part is, I mean, it's very important that we understand what these, stigmas are doing. And it's in line with the words that we speak. These words, these stigmas have been placed on us, um, dating all the way back to 1850, back in slavery, and it's been bought into the present day by day,
Yeah.
by suppressing them and just continuing to carry them as baggage.
Exactly. And as minorities, the thing that keeps us in stigma is the trauma. Well, at least one of the things is the trauma that is experienced through life, not just trauma from, someone has anxiety and things like that, but the things that are behind it. Okay. So with stigma, stigma stems from a lack of knowledge. We don't quite understand maybe what someone is going through. We have our own ideas, like the woman in the book says, hey, this is what you should do. And there's so many ways that we can communicate what we think, our judgment about someone that's going through a mental crisis, mental health crisis. It's in judgment is where we lose people, because we're judging what we think they should or should not do, or how they should or should not act, not understanding or even knowing what the trauma that they may have been through. The mother of Trina has experienced trauma, and that there's trauma on her. It's called associated trauma. So she may not have gone through, she may not have been the one in jail, but because every time she responds to Trina, it's an associated trauma. So people don't understand that part as well. So now you have a whole family that's impacted by this trauma. We don't speak up. We've been taught that you need to be silent. When families are going through this, you need to be silent. We even taught, even sometimes in our faith communities, in our churches, that we don't talk about the trauma. We don't talk about these things. We're going to just pray it away. We're just pray about it. And here's the scripture that goes with it, and you'll be fine. That's silencing. That's a stigma. That's a part of the stigma. The stigma is being silent. These things, you have people going inside churches that are hurt. And one thing that they need is for someone to hear them and to listen. We got to remain open, open to how to get help, not just for ourselves, but how to get help for our loved ones. We've got to be open that, what, this is not the reality that I imagine, like she said in the book, I'm sitting here waiting for Trina in the police station as if this was normal. Okay. So we have got to be open to the reality of what we're dealing with. And then we got to believe what people say, believe them at face value. And so when you're thinking about the trauma and you're thinking about stigma and you think about the minority, okay, those three elements, back in 1851, Samuel Cartwright had a diagnosis for slaves that if a particular slave did not want to be held captive, okay, in the conditions, the slave owners thought the conditions were just fine. But if the slave was resistant to being captive, shackled, beaten, demoralized,
Okay.
dehumanized, if they even thought that they wanted to be free, it was called drapetomania. It was a diagnosis called drapetomania. And this is a mental illness that was placed on slaves if they wanted to be free. If they wanted to, oh boy, my God, if they wanted to be if they wanted to be free from captivity. Now, they didn't ask to be captive. They didn't walk up and say, hey, enslave us, we'll be your indentured slaves for the rest of our lives. This was placed on them. And then, hey, by the way, because we don't want to be here, because we don't want to be your indentured slave, you're now going to tack on to us a mental illness, 1851, of drapetomania. Then there's another one that's called, and I may pronounce this wrong, it's called dysesthesia, a black bad feeling. This mental illness was diagnosed to slaves if they were resistant to the work, if they were acting lazy. This disease made them, if they were not wanting to follow directions, they were assigned, they were diagnosed with a mental illness called dysesthesia. So from 1851 to current, mental illness, Black people, minorities have been given mental illness
To disgrace
to,
them.
to describe a condition of trauma. Okay? If you were beaten, shackled, if you were kept from the very things for your life, for your livelihood, for your family's livelihood, and if you wanted to escape that, then we're going to give you this mental illness diagnosis. So you have, think of the many, many different diagnoses that are out there now. Mental illness in minority stems from very, very early. And we have got to stop being silent about it. We've got to stop even having um, family fighting with it. It's not just that, oh, Uncle such and such, he always crazy. Okay. This is generational. Generation after generation after generation is picking up the stigma, is picking up the description of who someone else says we are.
Mm-hmm.
But God says, no, that's not who we are. That's not who we are. He fearfully and wonderfully made us.
Mm-hmm.
He fearfully and wonderfully made us. And so we hide behind not talking about it, not sharing. And her story is so encouraging, and because I could feel her heart. Now, whether or not Trina is her actual real daughter or not, I don't know. I didn't read that far to know. I only know that in this book, the mother of Trina, I felt her pain because I felt the trauma that goes with mental illness from Trina's standpoint as well as from the mother standpoint.
I, I wanted to comment on, the stigma when you were talking about the stigma placed on the slaves for wanting to be free. Now you think about it. If you just think in your mind, think back, you're already in captivity.
Mm-hmm.
You already enduring harsh conditions. And you have, just like today, you have people who want to comply to avoid punishment.
Mm-hmm.
So you now brand or label these people that want to be free, placing the stigma over them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, stay away from Jim because Jim has drapomania.
Mm-hmm.
Having drapomania could get you hung. It could get you killed.
Mm-hmm.
You think about the damage of that. You think about the damage of that and putting that stigma. So, I mean, it's almost adding disgrace and shame to an already bad situation.
Yeah.
And people have, and I can see how, telling someone or even talking about your feelings when being traumatized can lead to disgrace. How it came to be disgraceful, because it was conditioned, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a sad thing because it has plagued us for so long. And as you
Mm-hmm.
said, it's been carried from generation to generation.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, someone in the family has to stand up and say, this generational curse is going to stop with me.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
it takes me back to this past weekend. I had the opportunity and the pleasure to speak at a women's conference on taming our tongues.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about taming our tongues, we were talking about it from the sense of speaking negativity over your life. And you think about all of this negativity that was spoken over the lives of these slaves and over the lives of people who did not comply or who had the mindset to be free.
Mm-hmm.
And the curse that just for them wanting to be free, the curse that was spoken over them that
Mm-hmm.
has been carried from generation to generation, even though it's been silent, that
Mm-hmm.
is speaking very loud and clear.
Wow.
Um, and it's disheartening because um, there's so much inequality and
Mm-hmm.
disparities in
Yeah.
receiving mental health.
Yeah.
And to have stigma added to that, it's damaging to the
Mm-hmm.
state of minority mental health.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder, it allows my mind to be more open as to why, great grandma didn't want to talk about it, or why, certain mental illnesses in families were kept secret. Because if you came from that era, that time, from generation to generation, to want to be free, you got diagnosed that you were crazy. You had a mental illness, you know and so, okay, we don't want that, so we're going to be quiet. We're not going to let anyone know who we really are. And we don't want that to get out, because we're going to have this label on us. And it just kind of, you know just grows from year to year, just evolves from decade to decade, to century, to nowadays, where one of the biggest elements now with mental illness, associated with mental illness, is going to be your opiate. So we went from the slave master kind of entrapping us and keeping us in our place, for just keeping us in our place, to now being linked in and being in bondage to now drugs, and specifically opiates, as it relates to minorities and the things that they are dealing with. And it's, I think it's 61.2 million Americans have a mental illness. And part of that is, I think it's 2 in 5 of those people are going to be uh, uh, struggle with drugs.
Mm.
And so, we go from one captivity to the next captivity to the next captivity. And so we've got to stop. We've got to stop, and we got to have conversations like this. If you go to the NAMI website, or the Mental Health America website, or the SAMSHA website. There's a ton of information to help people get connected, to give them information. There's a lot of studies, there's a lot of resources that is out there for people to get help. And it is, even taking a mental health first aid class, that's one of the things, because mental health is in my family, has been in my family since back as long as I can remember. And so grandmas and, all types of things. And so, I want to understand, what am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to do? How do I recognize? I want to understand what my loved ones are going through. And I want to know what I go through, and so taking a class like mental health first aid helps prepare you to be better prepared, to not judge, but to listen and to recognize the signs and symptoms. Because when you are out there and you call 911 on someone and it's a minority and they are exhibiting aggressive behavior, is it aggressive behavior because they're trying to do something malicious, or is it that mental illness?
Yes.
And that's what we're dealing with. And so um it's one of those things that the more we talk about it and expose it and not be afraid of it, because it can be very scary. It can look scary, it can have traumatic impact on one's life, but we have to have courage.
And that's what it starts with courage, the courage to have the conversation.
Mhm,
Courage to have the conversation, start the conversation, break the
mhm,
stigma. As we've been saying month after month, it's just being open to
mhm,
have that conversation, having an open mind to not to judge, because as you said, it's some of it is stuff that we've carried, um, and then some of it is just tradition, because mom didn't talk about it, dad didn't talk about it, grandma didn't talk about it, great grandma
mhm,
didn't talk about it.
mhm,
So I'm my own woman, I'm my own man, I'm strong enough to carry this and shoulder this, when in fact, the word of God tells us that we were created, we're a joint that supplies. So you're not created to carry anything alone.
mhm,
um and so we just have to be mindful that when we're talking about minority health, there are already so many stigmas on us. But if we don't stand up and say we're dropping these stigmas, we're releasing these bags that are weighing us down, that are holding us back from natural wealth, from natural health, from
mhm,
abundance and joy, abundance of peace, from having relationships, um, viable, productive relationships, loving and kind relationships, where we can actually talk to one another and understand one another. um, it's not going to happen for us. We can't wait for a knight in shining armor to come. We have to be those knights. And I don't know, for I guess for a better lack of a better analogy, but we have to be our own knights to stand up and say, listen, there's something going on with my loved one or with my friend or my neighbor. Let me have a conversation.
mhm.
Let's talk about it. And
Yeah.
if they're not open to talking to you, bring it up and say, hey, have you thought about talking to a therapist? Have you thought
Mhm,
about talking to a doctor, a coach?
mhm,
Um, you know, Someone, have you thought about talking to someone at your church?
mhm,
And as Christians, I do want to say that we have to be mindful that every situation can't be prayed away. We have to use prayer, but also acknowledge that it is real.
mhm,
Um, and as you said before, that has been an issue, especially in the minority community, because we are a people of faith, and we believe and we stand on our faith. And sometimes faith has taught us in the past that some things is better left unsaid, when
mhm.
in actuality it's not.
That's
So we have to be mindful of that.
Yeah. And
You know.
it's really one of those things that, I mean, that individual, if you think about, our generations today, you have children that are in elementary school that are medicated, taking antidepressant depression medicines. It starts early, it's
Mhm.
starting early, and it is, it, you may not know, and this is one of the things I think sometimes people, even when you're dealing with stigma, you may not know what to do to help someone, and you may even get it wrong. You may
Mhm.
have a conversation with someone, or you may, start a conversation, and it went left and you meant it to go right. You may mess it up, but the thing is, you don't give up. Sometimes we stop having conversations, and I raise my hand. You stop having conversations with someone because it didn't go the way you thought it should, or you didn't understand. The person didn't hear you, you didn't hear them, and it's so convoluted and so complicated by mental illness that you just don't know. And so, like you said, if you're not the one that person is going to trust to talk to, it's okay, as
Mhm.
long as that person is not in immediate danger for harming themselves or harming others. Help them get the help they need, direct them to the help they need. Like you said, counselors, therapists, peer counselors, EAP, whatever it is, your pastor, your teachers, whoever, your mama, your daddy. If it's somebody, and one a good question is always to ask someone that's having a mental crisis is, who do you feel comfortable talking to? You know, if you say, yeah, we're going to call 911, they may
Mhm.
be terrified of 911 because the last time 911 came, they put them in handcuffs
Or taser.
or tase them. Right. So that may agitate them a lot more. So ask them a simple question. Who do you feel comfortable talking to? If they come up with a blank, you can say, well, here are some options. We can now call 988. That started July 2022. If you have a mental health crisis, call 988. Um, you know, is there a family member? Maybe there's a family member that knows how to de-escalate what a person is going through. So don't be afraid to ask the questions. And then, let that person know, hey, I'm concerned about you. Um, is there a way that I could help? Is there anything that I can do? Is there anything that you know that can make this situation right now better? And if it's not, say, hey, here are some choices. Um, if you're not able to help that person, if you're not able to stay with that person or take them to where they, need to be, definitely don't overpromise what you can do for someone,
That's
because
right.
in overpromising, and if that person is expecting you to do something and you leave them, and then they're going to feel some kind of way, and that trust begins to break down. And so
Mhm.
only commit to what you know that you are really capable of helping
Mhm.
that person with. Okay. Sometimes somebody's having a mental crisis, and it's you're on your way somewhere else. Again, emergency is one thing, but if it's not an emergency, then try to get them to where they need can get the help that they need. It's one of those things, like, and especially us in the body of Christ, we have to be led by the Spirit. We have to have discerning spirits. We have to, and not we're not going to get it perfect. And I know I haven't. We're not going to get it perfect. But if we have the heart to help, and we ask the Lord to help us to help this person to get the natural help that they need, I guarantee you that you'll be going in the right direction, you know. And it's okay to let someone know. Like, sometimes I may say, hey, yeah, I have had these feelings of anxiety as well. Is there a way that you can connect with that person? Because sometimes that person can feel alone and isolated, and they begin to shut down. And just knowing that they're not alone is huge.
Mhm. And
Okay.
it is, and it's presence, just
Mhm.
someone's presence. And so let us, as we prepare to close out, let us be mindful that in the minority community there are already many different things that are keeping us from receiving the mental health care that we need. Let us make a vow or take a vow not to allow stigma to be one of those things. Those stigma is something that we can control. Um, as far as when it comes to being a barrier to receiving the help that we need. And so if we do our part in breaking the stigma, removing the shame, removing the disgrace, we can receive the mental health care that we need. Um, and, there's still going to be other barriers, but stigma doesn't have to be one.
Mm-hmm.
Stigma does not have to be a barrier. So
Right.
I think that this conversation has been very helpful. I know that um, the snippet of Miss BB Moore Campbell was very helpful, and I pray that those who are watching or who watch later on will go and look at that whole snippet, that whole video rather, to see. She's very passionate about breaking the stigma, and I am as well, because I know I too, like her, have loved ones that are dealing with mental health issues, drug addiction. No one's above it. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's something that we should all band together to help alleviate in our communities. Because if
Amen.
we don't stand up to do it, no one's going to rush in and save us. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
have to save ourselves.
Amen.
So, Phyllis, would you like to do you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, no, I think what you just said closed it out perfectly. Just thank you, and thank you everyone who's watching. And just remember to get the help that's needed.
Get the help that is needed. Thank you all for joining us tonight for Sisters Healing and Evolving's She Healthy Woman. If you feel like this broadcast or any of the activities that Sisters Healing and Evolving has done or do is beneficial to you or someone that you know, you can support us by either volunteering or donating your time, donating money. You can send monetary donations through Cash App at Sisters Heal INC. You can also contact us to be a volunteer, join the conversation. We will be soon starting meetings to support our community with peer coaching and peer counseling, different activities to help break the stigma so that we are using our mental health to build wealth. Because as we said, our health, not only our health, but our mental health as well is our wealth. And
Amen.
everyone, I thank you so much. And you have a wonderful and wonderful evening. Thank you, Phyllis, for joining us.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.